click on the subscribe button, especially the bell on the right side.
So, thank you so much for the invitation. Pranams to the custodians of this beautiful tradition, Ganapati, Saraswati, Dakshinamurti, and to my teachers. It's an honor to be here. And to, of course, honor C.S. Patel. So today I thought I would talk about the point of prosperity. We know that the top 3 topics that people come to do jyotish for is relationships, and then will I do well? And then the third one, it varies, but we could say the top 2, jobs, prosperity, and relationships. So I thought I would talk today on this very beautiful technique of Seshadri Iyer. And thank you for introducing him, Sunil. So he's an incredible mathematician and brilliant jyotishi with very fascinating methods, a lot of which he gleaned by going through the libraries of the Maharajas in South India. And so his methods are, we could say it's a purvata. It's not exactly found in Shastra exactly this way, but rearranged and based on things that are in Shastra. So that's very important rather than just making something up. And there was extensive research that he did on these methods. He had many students, and as I said, he was an incredible mathematician. And so he tested, and even in the introductions to his books, he talks about continually testing to see whether this stands the time, really. So when you have a newish method like this, then you subject it to phala and make sure that it stands up over time before it can be truly accepted. So if you are not familiar with Iyer, this is what he looks like. And my Guruji, Hartafo, and my Parama Guru, Mantri, actually corresponded quite a bit with Iyer. Hart had gone to India and found those books and brought them back to his teacher, who promptly took them away from him because his teaching method is you learn directly from the teacher. But then they went methodically through it, and they had some questions, and like all books, or most books, the books are there as guidelines. They're always meant to be discussed. This is a transformational vidya rather than transactional, which means why in this chart like this, why in this chart like this, and that has to get discussed. So they had questions and corresponded directly with Iyer. So there is many things in those books, but I thought I would talk today about what he calls the yogi point, the point of prosperity. So this particular point of prosperity is a calculation, and the calculation is based, again, on solid principles out of we see these methods in the Panchanga, calculating the Nitya Yogas, calculating tithis. So it has to do with the relationship between the sun and the moon. So we're going to have a look at this particular chart. I will reveal who this chart is at the end. But just to show you quickly the calculation for the actual yogi point. Now, I do want to say right at the start, this is an elaborate technique. It looks simple, and what I'm going to be doing today is fairly simple. I'm only going to be showing one of the principles. And the principle I'm showing is excellent, but it's embedded in a more elaborate system. And so if this is something that catches your imagination, I would suggest that you study the complete system, so that will improve your accuracy. So what Iyer did is he would add the longitudes of the sun, of the moon, and if you're not familiar, I imagine you are all familiar, but if you're not familiar with this way of expressing the longitudes, this represents 3 rashis complete. figured from Mesha, from Aries. So 3 complete, and then 12 degrees 57 into the next Rashi. So this would be Cancer, 12 degrees 57, and that's where we see the sun is. Same with the moon, 8 Rashis complete, and then 10 degrees 23 into Sagittarius. Now, to this, he adds a constant. And the constant is 3 Rashis, 3 degrees 20. It's never been clear why this constant. So my teacher had his hunches. I guess this wasn't one of the questions he asked Iyer, but all of you who are familiar with nakshatras, you would know that 3 Rashis, Cancer, 3 degrees 20, would be the beginning of Pusha nakshatra. And of the nakshatras, Pusha is one of the most auspicious. And if we think about it, the symbol for Pusha is the udder of a cow. There's a couple of symbols. There's also a lotus flower. The idea of the udder of the cow is letting down milk. And we know in the tradition that milk represents that flow of auspiciousness. And so perhaps this is why this is the constant that he chose. I don't know. So if we add these, we come to 14 Rashis, 25 degrees, 100 minutes. So the next is you have to do your reduction, subtracting 60 minutes, adding it to the degrees. And if this were larger than 30, you'd have to add it to the Rashis. And then 14 Rashis, you subtract a whole zodiac. Otherwise, you'd be going around and then 2 more. So the reduction would look like this: 2 Rashis, 26 degrees, 40. Well, that would correspond to a particular point in the zodiac and a particular, in this case, 2 Rashis complete, Gemini, 2640. So now what do we do with that once we find this point? And this is what is called the Yogi point. It falls in Gemini at 2640. Okay, so this Yogi point, we look for the graha that owns the nakshatra corresponding to the Yogi point. And that graha becomes, let's call it the president of prosperity. We could think of it like that, the president of prosperity. And it's called the Yogi. So in this particular chart, the Yogi is Jupiter, because 26 degrees 40 Gemini would be Purnavasu. So Purnavasu is the Yogi star. There's other various ways you can call it. We like to call it the Yogi star or the Yogi point. So in this particular chart, the Yogi is Jupiter. Now, the other 2 nakshatras of Jupiter are called the trinal nakshatras of the Yogi, or the Yogi trines, however you want to call it. They're also correlated with prosperity, but to a lesser extent. So there's something very auspicious about the Jupiter nakshatras from the point of view of prosperity. Now, sometimes people ask, well, what if it were the Saturn nakshatras, or what if it were the Rahu nakshatras? Well, grahas take on different roles, right? They're like actors in a play. You might have heard me last time talk about they have different hats they can put on. And so it still may be problematic in other areas of life, but when it comes to prosperity, it's wearing a nice green hat. The prosperity can be there under the right conditions. So in this particular chart, Purnavasu is the Yogi star. Jupiter is the Yogi. And Vishakha and Purva Bhadrapada are what we call the trinal nakshatras of the Yogi. So all of them have this idea of prosperity. All right, now there's more to this. Let's look at a couple of other points, and then I'll do a little interpretation on this chart for you to show you how it might work. We also have a vice president of prosperity. And the vice president of prosperity is the graha that owns the rashi that holds the yogi point. So it's called the duplicate yogi. And in this chart, the yogi point falls in Gemini, and therefore the duplicate yogi is Mercury. Now we have to be careful because in 3 instances, 3 grahas have their nakshatras crossing over into different rashis. And those 3 are the sun. The sun owns the very last pada of the fire signs, depending on which fire sign, Kritika, Uttarashadha, Uttarapalguni, the last pada of the fire signs. And then it crosses over into the earth sign. So that's one you have to be careful about. Mars splits 2-2. 2 padas in the earth sign, 2 padas in the air signs. And Jupiter, who is the yogi in this particular chart, crosses over. It has 3 padas, last 10 degrees of the air signs, and the very first pada of the water signs. So you have to be careful. So here it's the portion of Purnavasu that falls in the air sign, in Gemini, and therefore Mercury is the duplicate yogi. I hope that's clear to everyone, and this can be a little problem if you're not aware of it. All right, so one thing in a chart is if the president of prosperity, the yogi, shakes hands with the vice president of prosperity, the duplicate yogi, this can be a very powerful propellant for prosperity in the chart. What do I mean by shaking hands? It means that they have a relationship, a sambandha. So it could be a full-out sambandha, a mutual relationship like yuti, or like mutual drishti, or we could even get a one-way link for the grahas that have special aspects. So if there's a one-way link between Jupiter links to Mercury, for example, in this particular chart, it would be the yogi aspecting the duplicate yogi. That would be highly auspicious should it happen. It doesn't have to happen for prosperity, but should it happen, it would increase the possibility. Okay, so with this in mind, I'm going to introduce Iyer's first principle with respect to a very good possibility of prosperity in a chart. So assessing wealth using the point of prosperity, the principle is if the lagna point, so the actual ascending degree, is in the yogi nakshatra, the person will be predisposed towards material prosperity. Now, even so, this is not a given. We really want the yogi to be well positioned. Whoever owns that yogi point, which is now the rising star in the Kundali, we want that particular graha, the yogi, to be strong and favorably placed for good results. Now, favorably placed for good results, this is a little interesting phrase here. It means favorably placed for good results with respect to the topic of affluence. So it doesn't necessarily mean overall it has to be, wonderful in other respects in life. So this is what I'm saying, that even if it's a malefic, it winds up being favorably placed for wealth indications, or in and of itself, the yogi is strong. You don't want the yogi of the horoscope to be in a trick house and combust and afflicted and all these kinds of things. We're not going to be able to, there's a famous expression, you can't create a silk purse out of a sow's ear. So you can't turn a very disadvantaged graha into something that's going to produce. And so favorably placed for good results also implies that the chart might have prosperity combinations that the yogi joins. That would be some of the best results if the yogi actually joins dana yogas, for example. Or if the yogi is, my teacher used to say, kissing a Raj Yoga. So if a Raj Yoga happens and the yogi graha is either part of the Raj Yoga or is with the Raj Yoga creating grahas, then they're kissed with prosperity. So there are famous people that rise very high in life, but they may not be prosperous. That does happen. They still might be famous. So here, this also imbue that fame with affluence. Okay, so I think we have enough now to look at this sample chart. So there's several in jyotish. In order to rectify the combinations that we might see that might be auspicious, we need to have a strong captain of the ship. By captain of the ship, I mean the lord of the lagna. So having a lovely lagna is like having a lovely ship. But if you have a lovely ship and you have a really bad captain, I usually use this example, then you might have the Titanic. Beautiful ship, unsinkable, terrible captain. And what does he do? He sinks that beautiful ship. So having a strong lagnesha, this is what navigates us through our life. In this particular chart, I think everyone can see, and I'll be pointing to the North Indian chart, so sorry about that, but I think you can all follow if you read South Indian only. But here we see that the lagnesha, of course, is Mercury. And Mercury is not only Swarashi, it's also Digbala. So in the parlance that I've learned with my teacher Hart, we call it double first-year strength. It's like a first-order strength. It has two independent variables of strength. This is an incredible captain of the ship. Not only that, it's stabilized. It has the blessing of an aspect from an almost full moon. So an almost full moon, also the moon has a lot of strength. We consider a full moon is so auspicious in the tradition, and this one is very close to full. It also has the drishti of Jupiter. Now, there is some issues in this chart because of the malefic flanking, but a strong captain of the ship deals with the lemons in their life and makes it into lemonade some way or some other way, yeah. So this is a utilizer, and this is just what we want. Now, here's the amazing thing about this chart. It has to do with, let me just say one other thing before. From a static point of view, we already can see that there's a prosperity combination. What's the prosperity combination? It's the Dana Yoga between the Lagna Lord and the second Lord. So there's a full sambandha here, right? Mutual drishti of Mercury and Moon, making a beautiful Dana Yoga. And when you have a Dana Yoga that involves the Lagnesha, usually what we're talking about is self-generated wealth, the person themselves. So that will be very true of this person, as we'll see. So already there's this idea of prosperity in the chart. This person also has a nice dasha sequence. So born in Ketu, right? Mula Nakshatra is the Janma Nakshatra. And then the next will be, of course, 20 years of Venus. There'll be sun and there'll be moon. So he's going to hit this moon dasha at a very important age in his life. He'll be about 27 years old. But I'll also have 20 years of Venus, which is going to be quite interesting, as you'll see. So now, because we're looking at this yogi point, you can call it, we need to evaluate what's going on with the yogi point. Well, right away, of course, I'm using this chart for this reason. The principle that I'm talking about is, should the rising nakshatra be the actual yogi star and the yogi itself well placed, this will be a big boost in prosperity. So I see that I'm sure most of you can see if you're good in identifying your nakshatras. 25 degrees 59, Purnavasu. The yogi point here was 2640. So smack on the yogi point. So we have that principle that the rising nakshatra is the yogi star. Of all the 27, it's the actual yogi star. That's wonderful. Now becomes the question, who is the yogi? We know it's Jupiter. And then, is Jupiter well placed? So we see Jupiter, it's in a trikona, which is very good. And of course, in this particular chart, it's not only a natural benefic, it's a temporal benefic only. And it has no affliction, no destabilization at all. However, it's ordinary, so it isn't a very strong Jupiter when we look at the regular rules. But if we're looking at yogi vichara, then there's something very impressive about this Jupiter. And that is that Jupiter itself is in Vishaka. It's Swanakshatra. So part of the auspiciousness in terms of prosperity is if the yogi itself occupies one of its stars. Clearly, if it were in Purnavasu, that would be even better. But in any of its stars, as the yogi, with its yogi star rising, this is fabulous. So I know if you don't use this technique, if you're not familiar with it, you won't appreciate that this is rather rare to have this kind of confluence work out. What's even rarer, remember the vice president of prosperity? The vice president of prosperity is the duplicate yogi. And we figured out for this chart that the duplicate yogi is Mercury. Now, the duplicate yogi could be anywhere, right? Could be anywhere. Just because we figured it's a duplicate yogi doesn't mean it has to be where it is in this chart. But this is, again, part of the unbelievable features of this particular Kundali, which is why I wanted to show it to you, because the duplicate yogi itself is also in a yogi star, and in fact, it's in the actual yogi point. So Iyer says when the duplicate yogi is in the yogi star, wow. And it's the Lord of the ascendant. This is another Iyer principle. When the yogi, in this case, the duplicate yogi, is the Lord of the ascendant, that's also very good. It's better for the yogi, but given what Mercury is doing here, this is really incredible. And then, if that isn't enough, we have the president of prosperity, the yogi, who is in own yogi star, aspecting the vice president of prosperity. So maybe they're not shaking hands, but the yogi is slapping the duplicate yogi on the back. It's one-sided aspect. Good enough, more than good enough. So this chart is just loaded with incredible yogi principles. Also, Mercury, as the duplicate yogi, is involved in that Dana Yoga that I talked about before. It's the first Lord meeting the second Lord Moon. And the moon has strength being almost full. Mercury has 2 times strength being Swarashi and Digbala. So one would predict that this person would do very, very well. And this person has done very well. But I'm going to just tell you a little more of the story before I reveal who he is. So there's one other thing that's easy to overlook. And that is that you want to look at all the activations of the yogi stars. So we already see this one's activated beautifully ×2. The ascendant degree is in the yogi star, and the duplicate yogi is in the yogi star. And then when we move to the trinal nakshatra, Vishaka, we see, wow, the yogi itself is in that star. aspecting back into the other one. And when we go to Purva, Bhadrapada, no activation here. However, if you aren't really familiar with the extent of Purnavasu, that it's one of those nakshatras that crosses, you would miss that Venus is also in Purnavasu, the Yogi star. Now, unlike Mercury, Venus doesn't look like it has any intrinsic strength, but actually Venus is Vargotama in this chart. And it's what we call a qualified Vargotama. So there's a lot of talk about Vargotama, whether it means anything really, whether it doesn't mean anything really. Of course it means something. It's in the Shastra. Shastra values Vargotama. But like anything else, it has to be qualified. And it's qualified because it's dispositive, is not only almost a full moon, but in the Navamsha, moon is in Cancer, so Swarashi. So this boosts that Venus, which otherwise looks pretty afflicted. Now he runs Venus very early in his life. And there's a little controversy. I don't think there's any controversy, but there seems to be some controversy or whether this is the correct chart or whether he's actually rising. So one of the ways that we can solve this is you would not see that same kind of prosperity and not coming from where he had his prosperity, which is real estate. So I'm just going to mention that briefly, because the duplicate yogi giving all this prosperity is all the fourth lord of real estate, making that Dhamma yoga. So, and he runs that Mundasha, and that's where he made a huge amount of money. Money before, because that Venus is in the yogi star and does have some strength from its Vargotama position. But it looks awful in a way, doesn't it? So this was a particular person who was very, very unhappy in his growing up years. We can tell that he has his Papakarta yoga. You know, Venus might soften it a little on this side, but it's pretty intense. We have two malefics here, two malefics there. Part of the source of his problems was he had a terrible relationship with his father, a very brutish father, violent kind of father. And also we can see that the Lord of the ninth, Saturn, is combust. And the Karaka, the sun and the Lord of the ninth, go 6 away. So ninth bhava themes are part of this hemming in, this restriction on him. So he wound up doing sports. And a particular sport was bodybuilding. That's what he did, bodybuilding. Strong lagna. The lagna itself is unafflicted. It is hemmed in, but it is unafflicted and very powerful. And he got so good at that he wound up winning competitions. And in his Venus Dasha, he went to an international competition and won the prize. He became Mr. Universe. So if you don't already know from the things that I have said, I will show you who this is. This is Arnold Schwarzenegger. So with that prize, he had enough money. He was born in Austria. He never went home. That was it. He was out of there. He immigrated. So with that prize money, Venus, still in Venus, Lord of the 12th, immigration, he goes to the US. And he writes a manual about, weightlifting, this and that. And then he does get involved in the movies. And obviously he does well in the movies. That's how we know about him. And he plays those kinds of action sort of heroes. But honestly, even with the movies, his success comes financially when he takes all that money and invests it in property. And so he's this huge, beautiful Dana Yoga running in that Mudasha. And then he goes on and does other interesting things in his life, marries well, unfortunately divorces for other reasons. It's not that the yogi solves all the problems, but it certainly made him unbelievably prosperous. So I wanted to also show a second chart. I have time, Sunil? Is it okay? Sunil?
Yeah,
There?
it's perfectly fine. Please go ahead.
Okay. I thought I would show you a private chart. And I wanted to show you a private chart. But, sometimes you see these things in celebrities and then you wonder, well, am I ever going to see anything? And I'm not saying this is going to be like Schwarzenegger. I'm not introducing the next Arnold Schwarzenegger. No. But I do want to show you how it would work in a private chart. So this is an especially interesting chart. This is a chart I've been following for a long time, very long time. So I knew the mother even before this child was born. And so the mother has this child, and I wasn't asked right away, to do this particular chart. It's an acquaintance. But she, what I did, and it became apparent that this was a very problematic child, very difficult kid. So he was in his Mars dasha. And I think you could all see that he has, you might not be familiar with this particular yoga. It's one of the Nabasa yogas, where you have a mala of malefics, except we don't call it mala, we call it a sarpa yoga. The way this works is you have to have 3 malefics absenting Rahu Ketu in 3 different kendras. That's hard to do. It's not an easy yoga to have, and it's not one you want to have. So he has Saturn, Sun, Mars, and he's born into this Mala yoga. And you could see very afflicted Lagna, right? Very afflicted, very difficult. Lagna Lord itself, Jupiter, free of the affliction, but of course Nietzsche. So the growing up years were in Mars and in Rahu. And even at 2-3 years old, he was so difficult. So she did ask me what with this child. And at one point, a little older, kind of broke my heart. She said, is he going to be a criminal? She actually said that, because he was sneaky, he was difficult in so many ways. So I gave her some advice of some of the things that she should do with this child. And one of the things was sports, put him into sports, lots of activity, even violent sports, let him get it out that way. And so, he did do that, but it continued to be a problem. And I did say to her, I know you're going to have to get through this, but 24 years old, between 24 and 25, there will be a turnaround. You will hardly believe it. She didn't. She didn't believe it. I'll tell you why I said that, as we move along. So he winds up, he's a bright kid, and he winds up attempting college, but he's antisocial. He would just go in his room and close the door. He hardly had friends. It's very, very, very difficult. Again, my heart went out to the mother. And, what do we do with him? What do we do with him? And I said, it might be good for him to go into the military. I never said that about anyone, but I did say it about him. And actually, that wasn't exactly the sequence. He decided he wanted to go into the military. Nobody in that family ever enlisted. That was just not their way. They all went to college, this, that. And so she did ask me. I said, absolutely. Best thing, have him go into the military. So he went into the military. When you have Saturn, Mars in Kendras, It's a very good for people in the building industry, military, police, that protection industry, that kind of thing. And so he did serve in the military, terminated college. Family was very upset. But it was very physical, training camp, but he thrived. He loved it. And then they gave him all kinds of technical jobs. He wanted to go overseas. He wanted to actually go behind enemy lines. And it was actually in the Marines in the US. But the physical routine and the structure, I was concerned that maybe he wouldn't go with the structure. He wouldn't like authority figures telling him what to do. But he was okay. And he was given work on heavy machinery and electronics and that kind of thing. And he was very good at that. And so he wound up getting promoted up to 2 levels up, the captain. And when his time was up, they tried to recruit him to stay because he was actually really, really good. But when his time was up, he was just about 24 years old and moving into his Jupiter Dasha. So now you might say, why would I think Jupiter is going to be good? Why would he have this turnaround at between 24 and 25 years old? Well, Jupiter is in a parivartana with Saturn. So also Jupiter's retrograde. So although it's Nietzsche, there's still some strength. But the parivartana has this idea of, from a virtual level, they're going back to their own bhavas, back and forth and back and forth. I explained this in my talk last time, so I'm not going to re-explain it. So it's almost like Jupiter comes back in and strengthens its own house and goes back, and Saturn too. So this is a strengthening for Jupiter, this parivartana. Any parivartana involving the Lagnesha improves the Lagnesha's strength. But there's another piece of the story. If you figure the yogi principles here, Jupiter is the yogi and Saturn is the duplicate yogi. We don't have the yogi star rising, the way we did in the other chart. Although Ketu is in a Jupiter star, so there is that activation of it. But however, just having this sambandha between, because the parivartana creates a sambandha between the yogi and the duplicate yogi, and he's heading into the dasha of his yogi. So this is another principle. If it's a good yogi and the dasha runs, that could be the time of prosperity. And especially if the yogi transits his own yogi stars. And so when it was exactly when he got out of the service that his Jupiter Dasha started, almost exactly coinciding. It was amazing. And at that time, I had predicted to her earlier that when he was a child, I told her, no, don't worry. He will turn around. You're going to really be going through it. But he will turn around, and between 24 and 25, he won't be so antisocial. He will most likely finish college. He will most likely marry. So those were the things that I predicted, and that he would be prosperous. So those are the things that I had predicted. So he gets out, as soon as he's out of the Marines. While he was in the Marines, he wasn't dating. People wondered, is he possibly even gay? There's no women, nothing. But he starts dating and he gets into a serious relationship. He goes back to college. He does very well. Not only does he go to college, here's where the prosperities start to come in. When he leaves the military, they pay his full college costs. So college is paid for. So he goes to college. he meets someone, that one doesn't exactly work out. It was serious, but he's now met another. And the woman that he's very serious about now is a lawyer herself, very well placed. So he's done well in this college, and he set his sights higher. He finished 2 years of college, and he decided he wanted to transfer. And he wanted to transfer to top colleges. He applies to Stanford, he applies to Harvard, he just applies to Cornell, to Princeton, to Brown. I think there was one other one. He's accepted 3 out of 4 of the Yale. He's accepted to almost all of them, not to Stanford. The family was very happy they didn't want him to go that far away, not to Harvard. He gets into Princeton, an absolute full scholarship, including housing, including everything. He had this amazing recommendations from his commanding officers in the military. And I don't know the end of the story because he leaves in just a few weeks to go to Princeton as a transfer student. So he'll finish his education as what is considered in the US to be the #1 university on full scholarship. That's my story of a kind of regular person and what can happen if these principles work out well in a chart. So I will, I can leave this up or take the chart down, but I'd be happy to answer any questions. Sunil, you want to help me out? Because I might not see if there are questions when I'm in presentation mode here.
Any questions? Anybody? Any questions? Amitesh Sinha says very nicely explained. Monica Garwal has raised hand. Yes, Monica ji, can you ask?
Ma'am, I want to ask whether the combination of the Yogi planet and the duplicate Yogi planet we can consider in transit also. Like if they are not making any conjunction aspect, nothing in the birth chart, but if something is in transit, then also it will give good results.
Usually the idea for transit is you see them recreating something that's already in the birth chart. But I still do think that the transit of the duplicate yogi through yogi stars especially would be good. Whether the yogi and the duplicate yogi conjoined in transit would give good results if they have no sambandha natally, I think could be a point of research. I'm not going to be able to say one way or another at this point. I'd have to think about it and do a little research, but it's an excellent question, Monica. Very good question.
Very nice concept, ma'am, and you've explained beautifully. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. But now I do want to give my precaution again. You know, this is not standalone. You know, as there is the yogi, the president of prosperity, there's also the president of dearth, the president of poverty, called the avayogi. And so that has to also get taken into account. So there's much more to this. But these examples I gave you are clear and real. And I've seen so many examples, but there's more to it. It's a study. But I did want to inspire you all because I use this all the time. I teach this all the time to my students, and they love it. And it works, but it requires more depth and more time to get all those principles. Because there are things that reverse things, and you know, the usual with jyotish. See, the thing about jyotisha is there's the tendency, it's so ornate, it's so elaborate, to, you know, to make things simple. And then unfortunately, sometimes people mistake the model, you know, the simple pro forma or the simple model for the real thing, whereas it's really just a guideline.
Yeah.
And it has to be worked and worked and worked. And so this is no different. But if you do that, really understand these principles and work them, they're very rewarding. And by transit is very important, because many times people will ask me questions about, whether they'll get a scholarship or, something along those lines. And I might look for the transit of the yogi or something through its own stars.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Thank you, Monica. Many people have appreciated. Ruchi Datta says, thank you, ma'am. Excellent class. And Parul Kumar says, thank you so much, ma'am. Ruchi Datta is asking, Penny, ma'am, do you have a YouTube page?
I have made it a point not to teach on YouTube. I have joined other teachers. I have done some podcasts with Anuradha Sharada, for example, and some others. But my online program is always interacting with students, trying to shape their thinking, all of that. So, every once in a while, I think, I should do just some little ping, little interesting little subject here or there. But as of now, I don't have ongoing YouTubes that I put up because my philosophy and my teacher's philosophy is it should be live, teaching people, interacting with them.
Thank you. Sheetal J is asked, where can we find you, ma'am? We have already shared Penny Farrow's website in the chat box. Okay, just look at
Yeah, that's where you should find me. Info@vedicchart.com, or vedicchart.com is my website. We're actually building another website for our teaching platform because I have trained other teachers, and we're expanding the online teaching program. It isn't on board yet, but it'll be cosmickaleidoscope.com when it comes up, probably in the fall. I have a wonderful co-teacher, also Gurubai of mine, who not only is brilliant in jyotish, but she's brilliant in Hasta Samudrika. So we're teaching those subjects.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Thank you so much, Penny ji. It's an honor to have you, and amazing session.
It's
Very, very
totally
happy.
my pleasure, Sunil. And sometimes after you're so busy with all of this, when all of this is over, you and I need to talk, I think.
Yes, we definitely need to talk, and quite a few things we can do together. And I'm really happy you took out this time from your busy schedule, and you have at least given a base to start with for people to experiment. Many people, let me also say, Monica, you had a question. Some others would be having. Many people have experimented with the yogi point since many years. You can understand, Penny ji said that Ardifo and Mantriji exchanged knowledge and from Mr. Sheshadri. Okay, if can we stop the screen share, Penny ma'am?
Sure.
If those of you who have not heard about the greatness of Sheshadri Iyer, okay, his books are not so easily available. So I'll quickly say, K.N. Rao Saab, he's a legend. He once wrote that in Delhi, only 3 astrologers impressed him. One of them was K.C. Saxena, the Brigu astrologer. Now I'll tell a story, because I love stories. So when K.C. Saxena died, his wife was very upset. All astrologers had come to the house to pay respects for the funeral. And at that time, his wife was upset that, hey, how come you all did not know he's going to die? So at that time, there used to be an astrologer, G.K. Goel, very elderly man, a good friend of mine. He died quite a few years back. And G.K. Goel is also the one who's the editor for Brihad Jatak, published by Sagar Publication. So G.K. Goel said in his cupboard, there you will find a piece of paper, a prediction by Sheshadri. So she knew that G.K. Goel and K.C. Saxena were brilliant astrologers. So at that time, they removed that piece of paper and he showed it to all the astrologers. It was written, Jupiter will not cross your fourth house. And Sheshadri Iyer had signed it and stamped it. He used to stamp his predictions. I mean, for somebody to make that kind of predictions, especially to K.C. Saxena, and K.C. Saxena was very afraid. Okay, he had discussed it with G.K. Goel. He said, come on, yeah, it's Sheshadri Iyer. If Sheshadri Iyer writes, Jupiter is not in transit going to cross my fourth house, then what? You know? And K.C. Saxena himself was a brilliant guy. Okay. And once he was traveling in flight, okay, and somebody was ridiculing astrology. So at that time, K.C. Saxena did a prashna or something like that. Okay. Or that person had his horoscope, whatever. Many back it has been, I have forgotten most of the details. So K.C. Saxena asked him, right now, as we speak, is your wife learning a musical instrument that is tabla or something like that, Indian classical musical instrument? So he said, yes, this is the time she has her tuitions. She takes tuition classes to learn. So then he said, okay, in 2 months' time, she is going to run away with the teacher. So he said, that man was shocked. He said, will she come back? So he said, that time K.C. Saxena joked and said, this is my card. Okay, you come and meet me after 2 months. So and actually that incident later happened and that man came and met him, etc. and all that. Okay, so these are old astrologers. So you can understand who was K.C. Saxena, and who was Sheshadri Iyer. You know, the respect you have for elderly astrologers, you know. And it's something, you know, I have been so unfortunate. I was given the notes of K.C. Saxena by my mentor. Those notes were in short form and I could not understand those glyphs and all that. So for me, those are Brigu astrology notes. So anyways, it's such an honor, Penny ji, to have you. And it reminds me of the great astrologers, you know, and you taking up Sheshadri, his work is splendid, very splendid. Thank you so much, Penny.
Thank you. Thank you. And best luck and best wishes for the rest of the conference and to all the students. You know, it's such a beautiful opportunity for all of you. Thank you.
Definitely. Thank you, brother. Nitesh, recording. Can we restart the recording, Nitesh?